Have you ever encountered someone whose presence seemed to radiate an inexplicable power that transcended ordinary human interaction? That moment when you stand before another person and feel something beyond the material exchange of words and gestures, a force that draws you in not through conventional attraction, but through what can only be described as spiritual magnetism. This experience leaves many of us in a state of intellectual discomfort, unable to articulate what we've witnessed using the language of everyday life. Most people navigate their existence without truly understanding these profound encounters, dismissing them as mere coincidence or reducing them to simplistic explanations of personality or charisma. Meanwhile, the rich philosophical framework that Immanuel Kant provided us sits largely untapped, a treasure trove of concepts that could illuminate these experiences, yet remains inaccessible behind the intimidating walls of academic jargon and complex terminology. Perhaps you've felt that hollow sensation when attempting to understand such profound human connections, only to find yourself lacking the conceptual tools to truly grasp their significance. There exists a gap between your lived experience of encountering spiritually magnetic individuals and your ability to comprehend what makes them so extraordinary. By the end of our journey today, you will possess a clear understanding of how Kantian philosophy can help us recognize and interpret the signs of spiritual magnetism, particularly as manifested in women whose inner worlds have developed in specific ways. The insights you'll gain won't merely expand your intellectual horizon, but will fundamentally transform how you perceive and interact with those rare individuals who possess this quality. Understanding these concepts isn't merely an academic exercise, it's an urgent matter of enriching your experience of human connection today, right now, in your everyday encounters. So let us embark together on this philosophical exploration, discovering how Kant's ideas can unveil the mysterious nature of spiritual magnetism and what it reveals about our own capacity for transcendence. When we speak of spiritual magnetism through a Kantian lens, we must first understand that Kant revolutionized philosophy by suggesting that the mind isn't merely a passive recipient of external reality, but actively shapes our experience through innate structures of understanding. This radical idea, known as Kant's Copernican revolution in philosophy, offers us the first insight into spiritual magnetism. Those who possess this quality aren't simply reflecting external virtues, but are actively constructing their reality through a highly developed inner framework. The first sign that reveals women with strong spiritual magnetism is their noticeable ability to maintain inner autonomy regardless of external circumstances. Kant's concept of autonomy, the ability to give oneself moral law rather than merely following external rules, manifests in these individuals as a remarkable independence of spirit. Have you encountered women who seem to operate from an internal compass that remains steadfast, even when social pressures or conventional wisdom suggest different paths? This isn't mere stubbornness or rebellion, but rather what Kant would recognize as the exercise of practical reason, the capacity to determine one's actions based on principles that could apply universally. When you meet such a woman, you sense immediately that her decisions emanate not from social conditioning or emotional reactivity, but from a deeply cultivated inner garden of moral reasoning. Her choices carry the weight of personal conviction, yet somehow transcend mere opinion, approaching something like moral truth. This autonomy creates a magnetic pull because it represents something we all secretly yearn for, the capacity to act from our higher selves rather than being tossed about by circumstances, desire, or the opinions of others. You find yourself drawn to this quality perhaps without fully understanding why, because it resonates with your own deeper nature, your own capacity for moral autonomy, that Kant believed it was the essence of human dignity. Vou fazer uma pausa aqui e perguntar diretamente a você. Quantas vezes você já se sentiu profundamente atraído por pessoas que demonstram esta autonomia interior, mas não conseguiu articular exatamente o que estava sentindo? Essa sensação de admiração por alguém que parece operar a partir de princípios interiores inabaláveis, enquanto a maioria de nós é facilmente influenciada pelo ambiente ao nosso redor, você não está sozinho. Muitos de nós carregamos esta inquietação silenciosa, este desejo de compreender verdadeiramente o que Kant chamaria de boa vontade, aquela qualidade que brilha como uma joia em seu próprio direito. Gostaria que você compartilhasse sua experiência nos comentários. Pode ser algo simples como: minha maior dificuldade em reconhecer a autonomia moral em outros é... Seu comentário não apenas me ajuda a criar conteúdos mais direcionados às suas necessidades reais, mas também cria uma comunidade onde outros, que talvez estejam enfrentando os mesmos obstáculos, que você possam se sentir compreendidos e menos sozinhos em sua jornada filosófica. É através dessa troca sincera que crescemos juntos. Então, por favor, pause o vídeo por um momento e compartilhe sua experiência. Sua voz importa mais do que você imagina. The second sign of spiritual magnetism viewed through Kant's philosophy is a profound respect for the dignity of others. For Kant, human beings possess infinite worth, not because of any particular talent, beauty, or achievement, but simply because they are rational beings capable of moral action. Women with spiritual magnetism embody this principle in a remarkable way. They treat each person they encounter with a quality of attention that affirms their inherent worth. Notice how, in their presence, you feel truly seen, not for your social status, appearance, or utility, but for your essential humanity. This isn't a cultivated social skill, but emerges naturally from their recognition of what Kant called the categorical imperative, the moral law that commands us to treat humanity in ourselves and others always as an end and never merely as a means. When you encounter a woman with this quality, she listens in a way that makes you feel. Your thoughts matter, not because they benefit her, but because they emanate from a being of inherent dignity. She weighs her words carefully, not from social calculation, but from an innate understanding that communication is a moral act with real consequences for others. Her interactions are characterized by a notable absence of manipulation, gossip, or treating others as instruments for her own advancement. Instead, there is a quality of presence that communicates, "I see your humanity and honor it," without needing to articulate this explicitly. This profound respect creates a magnetic field around her, because it answers our deepest human need to be recognized not for what we do or what we have, but for who we essentially are. The third sign of spiritual magnetism through Kant's lens is the capacity to live simultaneously in two worlds, the phenomenal realm of everyday experience and the noumenal realm of higher meaning. Kant distinguished between the world as it appears to us through our senses, what he called phenomena, and the world as it might exist beyond our perception, what he termed noumena. while he believed we could never directly access this deeper reality. He maintained that moral action and aesthetic experience give us glimpses of this transcendent dimension. Women with spiritual magnetism demonstrate an unusual ability to navigate both realms. They attend to practical matters with diligence while maintaining awareness of the deeper significance behind ordinary events. You might notice how they perform mundane tasks with unusual presence, transforming simple actions into expressions of care or principle. They speak of everyday occurrences with insights that reveal universal patterns, seeing the cosmic in the common. This dual awareness manifests as a peculiar quality of attention, both fully engaged with the immediate moment, yet somehow connected to something beyond it. Their gaze seems to take in both you and something greater. Their words address your specific situation while touching universal truths. This is not mystical vagueness, but precisely what Kant described in his understanding of moral beings as citizens of two worlds, the sensible world of cause and effect, and the intelligible world of freedom and purpose. The spiritually magnetic woman doesn't escape into abstract ideals, nor does she become lost in material concerns. Instead, she bridges these domains, bringing transcendent values into everyday life and elevating ordinary interactions with meaning. This integration creates a compelling presence because it satisfies both our practical need for competence in the physical world and our spiritual hunger for meaning and purpose. The fourth sign of spiritual magnetism is a distinctive relationship with beauty and art, what Kant would connect to his concept of the aesthetic judgment. In his Critique of Judgment, Kant explored how our experience of beauty offers a unique kind of pleasure, one that is disinterested, universal, necessary, and purposive without specific purpose. Women with strong spiritual magnetism often demonstrate a refined aesthetic sensibility, not in the sense of following fashion or collecting expensive objects, but in their capacity to perceive and create harmony. You might notice how their living spaces, whether humble or grand, exhibit thoughtful arrangement that feels both personal and somehow right, not following trends, but expressing inner principles of balance and meaning. They often speak of natural beauty, with unusual perception, identifying subtle qualities that others overlook. Their appreciation isn't possessive or calculating, but contemplative, finding in beauty what Kant called purposiveness without purpose, a sense of rightness that serves no practical function, yet feels deeply significant. This aesthetic sensitivity extends beyond traditional art forms into their manner of speech, the rhythm of their movements, and their way of engaging with others, all exhibit a quality of form that suggests meaning beyond utility. What makes this capacity magnetic is that it reminds us of our own ability to experience the world not merely as resources to be used, but as manifestations of meaning to be contemplated. In the presence of someone with this quality, we're reminded of our own capacity for disinterested pleasure, a form of joy that doesn't depend on possession or advantage, but arises from perception itself. The fifth sign of spiritual magnetism, through Kant's philosophy, is an unusual relationship with time, specifically an ability to live with what he might call a regulative ideal, a perfect standard that guides action while never being fully realized. Women with spiritual magnetism demonstrate patience that isn't passive waiting, but active cultivation, a willingness to invest in processes without immediate reward because they're guided by principles that transcend immediate results. Notice how they approach personal growth relationships or creative projects with unusual commitment, unbothered by slow progress, because their focus isn't on achievement, but on alignment with inner principles. This temporal orientation manifests as a calm persistence that isn't driven by external deadlines, but by faithfulness to values. It's visible in how they speak of their aspirations, not with anxious ambition, but with steady purpose in how they handle setbacks, not with desperate scrambling, but with reflective adaptation. This quality creates magnetism because it stands in stark contrast to our culture of immediate gratification and quick results. In the presence of someone oriented toward enduring values, we're reminded of our own deeper aspirations beyond momentary success or pleasure. Their relationship with time creates a field of permission around them, where others feel they too can commit to what truly matters without the tyranny of immediate results. This temporal horizon, rooted in what Kant would call the postulates of practical reason, connects daily choices to eternal principles, giving ordinary actions extraordinary significance. The sixth sign of spiritual magnetism from a Kantian perspective is a distinctive form of courage, specifically moral courage. Kant distinguished between inclination following one's desires and duty following moral law, often requiring us to act against our immediate inclinations. Women with spiritual magnetism demonstrate remarkable willingness to face discomfort, criticism, or even danger when principles are at stake. This isn't reckless bravery, but reasoned commitment to what Kant would call the moral law within. You might notice how they speak uncomfortable truths without aggressiveness, defend vulnerable individuals without seeking credit, or maintain ethical standards, even when doing so brings personal cost. Their courage has a distinctive quality. It isn't driven by anger, rebellion, or desire for recognition, but by quiet conviction about what is right. When they stand firm, it doesn't feel like rigid stubbornness, but like necessary alignment with deeper truth. This moral courage creates magnetism because it reminds us of our own capacity to rise above self-interest and fear. In their presence, we feel both challenged and inspired, sensing that they've actualized a potential that exists within us as well, the capacity to let moral principles, rather than convenience or advantage, guide our choices. Their example awakens what Kant called respect for the moral law, a feeling that isn't comfortable, like pleasure, but compelling and elevating, causing us to recognize the dignity of our own rational nature. The seventh, and perhaps most distinctive sign of spiritual magnetism through Kant's philosophy, is a quality we might call transcendent hope. Kant proposed 3 questions that define the philosophical project. What can I know? What should I do? What may I hope? This last question points to something essential in human experience, our need to believe that moral action ultimately connects to happiness or fulfillment. Women with spiritual magnetism often embody what Kant called the highest good, the ideal state, where virtue and happiness align. They maintain faith in the meaningfulness of ethical action, even without guarantees of reward or recognition. You might notice how they speak of difficulties, not with bitter resignation, but with a peculiar confidence that goodness matters even when it seems ineffective. They invest in others' growth not from calculated reciprocity, but from genuine belief in human potential. This isn't naive optimism, but what Kant would recognize as rational faith, the necessary belief that makes moral striving possible in an uncertain world. Their hope has a distinctive quality. It doesn't deny suffering or injustice, but maintains that these don't have the final word, that our moral choices connect to something beyond immediate consequences. This transcendent hope creates perhaps the strongest magnetic pull because it addresses our deepest existential need to believe that our lives and choices matter beyond their measurable outcomes. In the presence of someone with this quality, we feel our own capacity for meaningful action expanding, not because they've provided certainty, but because they've demonstrated the possibility of living with principled uncertainty. What's remarkable about these 7 signs of spiritual magnetism is that when viewed through Kant's philosophy, we see they aren't supernatural powers or inborn talents, but expressions of developed humanity. The spiritually magnetic woman hasn't transcended human nature, but has more fully realized it, cultivating capacities that exist as potential in all of us. This explains the magnetic quality they exert, not as some mysterious force, but as recognition. A part of us recognizes in them a more integrated expression of what we ourselves could be. Kant believed that human beings occupy a unique position in nature as creatures who are part of the physical world, yet capable of transcending natural causality through moral freedom. Women who manifest spiritual magnetism embody this paradoxical position with unusual grace, navigating material reality while maintaining connection to transcendent principles. They don't resolve the tension between these domains, but live within it, productively creating lives that honor both physical limitations and spiritual possibilities. Their magnetism doesn't make them perfect. Often they struggle with the very qualities that make them compelling. Their moral sensitivity can lead to excessive self-criticism. Their awareness of ideals can create dissatisfaction with reality. Their courage can isolate them from those who prefer comfort to truth. Yet these struggles only make their commitment more compelling, showing that integration isn't achieved once, but maintained through ongoing effort, the work of becoming fully human. As we contemplate these signs of spiritual magnetism, we might wonder how to cultivate these qualities in ourselves. Here, Kant offers a perspective both challenging and hopeful. He believed that moral development isn't primarily a matter of learning new information, but of clarifying and applying principles we already implicitly recognize. The spiritually magnetic woman hasn't discovered secret knowledge, but has developed a more consistent relationship with moral truth that all rational beings can access. This suggests that developing spiritual magnetism isn't about acquiring esoteric teachings, but about removing the obstacles, indifference, deception, habitual convenience, that prevent us from fully expressing our rational nature. The path begins with what Kant called enlightenment, mankind's exit from its self-incurred immaturity, the courage to think for oneself rather than relying on external authorities. It continues through regular examination of our maxims, the principles behind our actions, testing whether they could serve as universal laws. It requires developing what Kant called an enlarged mentality, the capacity to consider perspectives beyond our own particular circumstances. Most fundamentally, it demands honest recognition of the moral law that presents itself to consciousness, not as external command, but as the voice of our own deeper nature. This path isn't easy, requiring constant vigilance against self-deception and the courage to face uncomfortable truths about ourselves. Yet it offers the possibility of integration, not perfect virtue, but growing alignment between our actions and principles, our outer lives and inner convictions. If you've ever felt overwhelmed by the complexities of spiritual development, know that you're not alone on this journey. The path toward cultivating the kind of magnetic presence we've explored doesn't need to be solitary or confusing. I invite you to subscribe to this channel and become part of a community of individuals who, like you, seek clarity. Amid the fragmented information about philosophical living, by subscribing, you'll receive weekly reflections that transform seemingly inaccessible concepts from Kant and other thinkers into practical insights for your daily life. We aren't just studying philosophy, we're learning to perceive more deeply, question more wisely, and live with greater purpose. Click the subscription button now, not as an obligation, but as a gift to your own intellectual and spiritual development. And if today's exploration of spiritual magnetism through Kant's philosophy has brought you some clarity, please leave a like as a way of saying, we're together in this pursuit of deeper understanding. Remember, exploring these Kantian perspectives isn't merely an academic exercise. It's a way of awakening to a more conscious and authentic existence, where we recognize and cultivate the magnetic qualities that already exist within us as potentials waiting to be realized.